Sometimes rock bottom looks like a $200 cabin with a sagging roof and $17 left in your pocket. Caleb Harper knew that feeling the afternoon he first stepped onto the property in northern Montana. The old cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, miles from anywhere that mattered. Sunlight streamed through cracked windows, casting long shadows across the weathered floorboards. But there was something else, a strange golden glow seeping up through cracks in the floor itself. The next morning, curiosity won. Caleb knelt down and pried open an old cellar door hidden beneath years of dust and forgotten time. What he discovered in that dark space below would turn his broken life into something he never imagined possible. What was hidden in that cellar? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The cellar stairs creaked under Caleb's weight as he descended into the cool darkness below. He'd found a flashlight in the kitchen drawer, one of the few items left behind by whoever owned this place before him. The beam cut through decades of settled dust, illuminating wooden crates and cardboard boxes stacked against stone walls. 6 months ago, Caleb Harper had been a different man. He'd had a good job in construction, a modest apartment in Billings, and regular visits with his 9-year-old daughter, Sophie. Then the company downsized. The divorce settlement had already drained most of his savings, and the custody battle ate through what remained. Without steady income, his ex-wife Patricia filed to reduce his visitation to supervised visits only. The judge agreed. Caleb had spent 3 months applying for jobs, burning through what little money he had left. When he saw the online auction listing for a cabin in northern Montana, starting bid $200, he scraped together his last bit of cash from selling his power tools. Tools his father had given him when he'd first entered the trades 20 years ago. Selling them felt like admitting defeat, but keeping a roof over his head mattered more than sentiment. The cabin was worse than the photos suggested. The porch sagged on the left side, rotted boards giving slightly under his boots. Several windows were cracked, and he could see daylight through gaps in the roof from inside. But the oak beams, those were solid. Someone had built this place with care, even if time and neglect had taken their toll. That first afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the dusty windows, Caleb had noticed it. A warm, golden glow coming up through cracks in the living room floorboards. At first, he thought it was just the angle of the sun, but the glow persisted even as shadows lengthened. He'd found the cellar door hidden under a threadbare rug, its hinges stiff with age and disuse. Now, standing in the cellar with his flashlight, Caleb understood. At the far end of the space, set into what must be a south-facing wall, was a stained glass window. The afternoon sun poured through it, transforming ordinary light into liquid gold that pooled on the floor and reflected upward through the gaps in the boards above. The window depicted a simple scene, a sunrise over mountains, rendered in amber gold, and deep orange glass, beautiful, unexpected, like finding a diamond in a coal mine. Caleb turned his attention to the boxes. The first one he opened was filled with books, carpentry manuals, some novels, a few photo albums. He pulled out one of the albums, its leather cover worn smooth with handling. The first photograph showed a young couple standing in front of an empty lot, holding hands. The man looked to be in his 30s, dark-haired and lean, with the kind of weariness in his eyes that spoke of hard times. The woman beside him was smiling, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. He flipped through more pages. The couple building a cabin, this cabin, frame by frame. The man working on the foundation, the woman painting window frames. Later photos showed the completed structure, modest but solid. The couple looking older, grayer, but somehow more at peace than in those early shots. In the second box, Caleb found a leather-bound journal. The name embossed on the cover read, Howard Brennan. He carried the journal upstairs, along with the photo album. The sun was setting, painting the cabin's interior in shades of amber and rust. Caleb settled into the one chair that didn't wobble, a wooden rocker near the stone fireplace, and opened to the first page. March 15th, 1987, Eleanor says I should write this down. Says maybe someday it'll matter to someone. I'm not so sure, but she's usually right about these things. We broke ground on the cabin today. 34 years old and starting over from nothing. That's what bankruptcy does, strips you down to bare earth and says, now what? But I'll tell you what. You build. You put one stone on top of another, and you build. Lost the business. Lost the house. Lost most of our friends when the money dried up. But I've still got Eleanor, and she's still got me, and she says that's enough to start with. She's pregnant again. Doctor says she shouldn't be, not after what happened last time, but she wanted to try. So here we are, building a cabin in the woods, starting a family, pretending we know what we're doing. The land cost us everything we had left. 3 acres at the end of a dirt road, so far from town that nobody else wanted it. Perfect. Caleb's throat tightened. He knew that feeling, the raw desperation of having nothing left, the grim determination to rebuild from ruins. He turned the page. April 2nd, 1987, Eleanor's been sick every morning. The pregnancy is hard on her, but she won't complain. She brings me lunch at the building site, sandwiches and lemonade, and sits on a stump watching me work. Sometimes she reads aloud from books she borrows from the library. Other times we just sit in comfortable silence. I'm using hand tools mostly. Can't afford power equipment, and honestly, I prefer it this way. There's something honest about a hammer and saw, about feeling the wood respond to your hands. This cabin won't be fancy, but it'll be solid. It'll last. We're building it to last. The entries continued, documenting the slow construction of the cabin through spring and summer. Howard wrote about small victories, completing the frame, installing the roof, building the stone fireplace. He wrote about setbacks, running out of lumber, a week of rain that delayed everything, cutting his hand badly enough to need stitches. Through it all, Eleanor appeared in nearly every entry, a steady presence of encouragement and faith. September 19th, 1987 moved into the cabin today, even though it's not finished. We have a roof, walls, and a working fireplace. That's enough. Eleanor made soup in our new kitchen while I installed the last window. She cried when I showed her the stained glass piece I'd commissioned. Spent money we didn't have on it, but the look on her face made it worth every penny. It shows a sunrise. New beginnings. That's what this is. Caleb looked up from the journal, his eyes drifting to the floor where the golden glow still seeped through the cracks. Howard had built that window, installed it as a symbol of hope. How many mornings had he and Eleanor sat here, watching that light fill their home? He read for another hour as darkness gathered outside. The journal became a window into a life rebuilt brick by brick, day by day. Howard took odd jobs, carpentry work, furniture repair, anything to earn money. Eleanor cleaned houses, took in sewing. They were poor by any measure, but Howard's entries showed a growing contentment, a peace that seemed to deepen with each passing month. December 24th, 1987, first Christmas in the cabin. Eleanor's belly is huge now, baby due in February. We can't afford much, but we have each other, and this place we built with our own hands. That feels like wealth. Strange thing about losing everything, you learn what matters. 10 years ago, I was chasing success, measuring my worth in dollars and square footage and what people thought of me. Now I measure it in Eleanor's smile, in a roof that doesn't leak, in knowing I built something that will outlast me. If someone finds this journal someday, I hope they understand you don't need much to be rich. Just something worth building, and someone worth building it for. Caleb closed the journal, his hands trembling slightly. Outside, full darkness had fallen. He lit the oil lamp he'd found in the kitchen, no electricity yet in the cabin, and sat in the amber glow, thinking about Howard's words, something worth building. Someone worth building it for. He thought about Sophie, about the court date looming in his future, about the supervised visitations that felt like punishment. He thought about the tools he'd sold, the apartment he'd lost, the life that had collapsed around him, but he also thought about Howard and Eleanor, who'd had even less and built something beautiful anyway. Maybe that's what this cabin was, not just a cheap place to live, but a roadmap. A guide to starting over, left by a stranger who'd walked this path before him. Caleb pulled out his phone, checking for signal. 1 bar, barely enough. He typed a message to Sophie. Found a cabin, sweetheart. Has a fireplace and everything. Can't wait for you to see it someday. He knew someday was optimistic. Knew Patricia would fight any attempt to bring Sophie here. Knew he had to prove himself stable, employed, worthy of trust again. But for the first time in months, someday felt possible. He picked up the journal again, ready to read more, to learn more about the man who'd built this place. Howard Brennan might be long gone, but his words remained. And Caleb was hungry for every lesson they contained. The golden glow from the cellar had faded with the sunset. But in his mind, Caleb could still see it, a promise of light breaking through darkness, of new beginnings waiting beneath old floors. Tomorrow he'd explore more of what the cellar held. Tonight he'd read about a man who'd lost everything and found something better. Outside, the Montana wilderness stretched dark and vast. Inside the cabin, lamplight flickered against log walls, and a man who'd forgotten how to hope began, slowly, to remember. Morning came with rain pattering against the cabin's roof. Caleb woke to find 3 steady drips falling into the living room, 1 near the fireplace, 2 by the window. He positioned the few pots and pans he'd brought with him to catch the leaks, their rhythmic pinging creating an oddly peaceful soundtrack after a breakfast of instant oatmeal and black coffee. He returned to the cellar with better lighting, a battery-powered lantern he'd picked up at a gas station on the drive north. The stained glass window looked different in the grey morning light, its colours muted but still beautiful. He opened the second box, finding it packed more carefully than the first. Inside, wrapped in what looked like an old tablecloth, was a leather-bound photograph album. Caleb carried it upstairs and settled in the rocking chair, the journal from last night beside him. The album's first page held a single photograph, Howard and Eleanor, on their wedding day. Young, probably early 20s, Howard wore an ill-fitting suit, Eleanor a simple white dress. They stood on courthouse steps, no elaborate ceremony, no crowd of well-wishers. Just 2 people holding hands, looking at each other like nothing else in the world mattered. Caleb turned the page. More photos, organized chronologically. Howard in a workshop, surrounded by half-finished furniture. Eleanor in a garden, hands in the soil. Then photos that told a darker story. A small gravestone, Eleanor weeping beside it, Howard's arm around her shoulders. The stone read, Baby Boy Brennan, 1976. Too beautiful for Earth. His chest tightened. Howard had mentioned loss in the journal, but seeing it captured in photographs made it real in a way words couldn't quite manage. The next pages showed the couple aging, grief visible in the lines around their eyes, the way they held each other. Then tucked between photos, Caleb found a newspaper clipping from 1982. Local businessman declares bankruptcy. Howard Brennan, owner of Brennan Fine Furniture, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy this week, following years of declining sales and mounting debt. The business, which employed 15 people at its peak, closed its doors permanently on Monday. Creditors are seeking to recover approximately $200,000 in outstanding debts. Caleb read the article twice. Howard hadn't just failed, he'd failed publicly, spectacularly. 15 employees out of work, $200,000 in debt. The kind of failure that followed you, that people remembered and whispered about. He flipped through more photos. Howard and Eleanor leaving what must have been their house, boxes stacked in a moving truck. The empty lot where they'd eventually build the cabin. Then progress photos showing the cabin taking shape, the same ones he'd seen in the other album, but with more context now. These weren't just pictures of construction. They were evidence of resurrection. Later photos showed the couple settling into the cabin, growing older together. But there was something in their faces, a peace that seemed to deepen year by year. By the 1990s photos, the grief and stress had faded, replaced by something calmer, more grounded. Between the album's pages, Caleb found letters. Not many, maybe a dozen, all addressed to Howard and Eleanor, all in the same handwriting. He pulled one out, postmarked 1989. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, my name is Eleanor Foster, and I wanted to thank you for the dining table you built for my parents' anniversary. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Every joint perfect, every surface smooth as glass. My father says it's the finest piece of furniture he's ever owned. He also told me about your business troubles, about starting over. I wanted you to know that your work speaks louder than any bankruptcy filing. You may have lost your company, but you haven't lost your gift. Thank you for creating something so beautiful. More letters followed, similar in tone. Customers thanking Howard for custom pieces, praising his work, encouraging him to keep going. By the late 1990s, the letters showed Howard had built a new reputation, smaller, more personal, but solid. Caleb found Howard's journal and flipped to an entry from 1992, 10 years since the bankruptcy. Eleanor and I were talking last night about how strange life is. 10 years ago I was wealthy, at least on paper, and miserable. I had a big house, expensive cars, a business with my name on the building. I also had crushing debt, employees I couldn't pay, and shame that followed me everywhere. Today I'm poor by most measures. We live in a cabin I built with my own hands. We drive a truck that's older than our marriage. My business is just me, working out of a shed, making furniture one piece at a time for people who appreciate the craft. And I'm content, truly content. Funny how that works. Eleanor says wealth isn't about what you have. It's about not needing what you don't. I think she's right. We have enough. We have each other. We have work that matters. That's wealth. Caleb set the journal down, staring at the rain-streaked windows. Howard's words settled into him like seeds finding soil. He'd spent the past 6 months feeling like a failure, measuring himself against the life he'd lost. But maybe that life hadn't been as valuable as he'd thought. Maybe losing it had been necessary. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his stomach dropping. "Patricia," he answered. "Hello." "We need to talk about Sophie." Patricia's voice was tight, controlled. The tone she used when she was angry but trying to sound reasonable. "What about her?" "The child support." "You're 3 months behind, Caleb, 3 months. The court order—" "I know what the court order says." He stood, pacing the small living room. "I'm working on it." "The new job?" "What new job? You don't have a job. You bought some falling-down cabin in the middle of nowhere, and you think that counts as stability." She paused. "My lawyer says we can petition to terminate your visitation rights entirely if you can't meet your obligations." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Patricia, please. I just need time." "You've had time. 6 months of time. Sophie keeps asking about you, and what am I supposed to tell her? That her father can't be bothered to—" "I can be bothered!" The words came out sharper than he'd intended. He forced himself to breathe, to calm down. "I'm trying. I'm really trying. This cabin, it's cheap. I can live here while I figure things out." "Figure things out?" "Caleb, you're 38 years old. When are you going to stop figuring things out and actually do something?" He had no answer for that. The silence stretched between them. "Court date is set for 6 weeks from now," Patricia finally said. "If you can't show the judge you're stable, employed, housed properly, meeting your obligations, I'm asking for full custody. Supervised visits only. If that you can't, I can, and I will. For Sophie's sake. She deserves better than broken promises and a father who can't get his life together." The line went dead. Caleb stood in the middle of the cabin, phone in hand, the weight of his failures crushing down on him. The rain drummed harder on the roof, the leaks pinging into their containers. Through the floorboards, a faint golden glow seeped up from the cellar, but it felt distant now, irrelevant. 6 weeks. He had 6 weeks to prove he wasn't the failure Patricia believed him to be. 6 weeks to find steady income, to show he could provide. 6 weeks to become someone worthy of his daughter's trust. He looked down at the journal in his other hand, at Howard's words about contentment and wealth and starting over. Easy for Howard to write. He'd had Eleanor. He'd had time. He'd had a wife who believed in him. Caleb had 6 weeks and $17. He sank back into the rocking chair, the albums spread open on his lap. Howard and Eleanor stared up at him from a photograph taken in their 60s, standing in front of the cabin, arms around each other. They looked genuinely happy. Not the desperate, clinging happiness of people pretending everything was fine. Real happiness, earned through years of work and patience and choosing each other every single day. Caleb picked up the journal again, flipping forward through the entries, looking for answers. Looking for some indication of how Howard had done it, how he'd turned bankruptcy and public shame into peace and contentment, how he'd rebuilt not just a business, but a life. The afternoon faded into evening. The rain continued, and Caleb read, searching for a roadmap through the ruins of his own life, guided by the words of a stranger who'd walked this path before him and somehow made it through to the other side. Outside, the wilderness was dark and wet and indifferent. Inside, a man who'd forgotten how to fight remembered why it mattered. For Sophie. Everything had to be for Sophie. He turned the page and kept reading. 3 days after Patricia's phone call, Caleb had settled into a rhythm. Wake at dawn. Read Howard's journal while drinking coffee. Spend the morning exploring the cellar's contents. Afternoons devoted to repairs, patching the roof leaks, replacing rotted boards, fixing what he could with limited supplies. The work felt good, familiar. His father had been a carpenter, had taught him the trade before he died when Caleb was 19. Working with his hands connected him to something he'd lost years ago, not just his father's memory, but his own sense of competence, of being able to create something solid and real. On the 4th morning, he found a metal tube in the corner of the cellar, the kind used to store architectural drawings. Inside, rolled carefully, was a set of blueprints. Caleb spread them across the cabin's floor, weighing down the corners with books. The drawings were hand-drafted, meticulous in their detail. Every measurement precise, every angle calculated. At the bottom right corner, in neat lettering, Howard Brennan, 1986. But it was the notes in the margins that caught Caleb's attention. Bedroom. Window faces east. Eleanor needs morning. Light. Kitchen overlooks meadow. Something beautiful to see while working stone. For fireplace from the creek. Build it to last 3 generations. No shortcuts. No cheap materials. If it's worth building, build it right. Every design choice had a reason, a philosophy behind it. The cabin wasn't just shelter, it was a statement about how to live, what to value, how to approach the work of making a home. Caleb traced the lines with his finger, following Howard's vision. The blueprint showed details he hadn't noticed yet. A built-in bookshelf in the bedroom, a window seat in the living room, a small root cellar beneath the main cellar. Hidden touches, thoughtful additions that revealed themselves slowly. He spent the afternoon comparing the blueprint to the actual structure, noting where Howard had followed his plans exactly and where he'd adapted based on the materials at hand or Eleanor's preferences. The man had been flexible but never careless. Every change served a purpose. In the bedroom, Caleb found the built-in bookshelf exactly where the blueprint indicated. Most of the shelves were empty now, but a few books remained. Carpentry guides, a book on traditional woodworking techniques. Several novels with Eleanor's name written inside the cover. He pulled out the woodworking book, flipping through pages marked with Howard's notes. Techniques for joining wood without nails. How to sand by hand for a glass-smooth finish. The proper way to treat different types of lumber. A memory surfaced, his father showing him how to plane a board, the steady rhythm of the tool, the curl of wood shavings falling away. Feel the grain, his father had said. Work with it, not against it. The wood will tell you what it wants to be. Caleb hadn't touched woodworking tools in years. After his father died, the work had felt hollow, mechanical. He'd stayed in construction because it paid the bills, but he'd lost the love for it. The sense of craft his father had tried to teach him, but standing in Howard's cabin, holding a book about traditional techniques, something stirred in him. Not quite hope, that felt too bold, but possibility. The idea that maybe he could do more than just survive here. Maybe he could build something. He returned to the cellar and found what he'd been looking for, Howard's tool chest. A large wooden box, handmade, with Howard's initials carved into the lid. Inside, tools wrapped carefully in oiled cloth. Chisels, planes, saws, mallets, everything maintained, preserved, waiting. Caleb lifted out a hand plane, unwrapping it carefully. The blade was still sharp, the body oiled and smooth. Howard had taken care of these tools the way some people took care of family heirlooms. Because that's what they were, the instruments of his craft, his redemption. Behind the cabin, hidden by overgrown brush, Caleb discovered a shed. The door stuck, swollen from moisture, but he managed to force it open. Inside, a workshop. Workbench, vise, shelves of hand tools arranged precisely. Everything covered in dust but fundamentally sound. On the workbench sat a book, not Howard's journal, but something similar. A workshop manual filled with drawings and notes. Traditional woodworking techniques, written on the first page in Howard's careful script. Caleb opened it, reading by the light filtering through the grimy window. A craftsman rushes nothing. Quality takes time. Life takes time. The world wants everything fast and cheap. Resist this. Make things that last. Make things that matter. When you work with wood, you're working with something that was alive. Respect that. Learn its character, its grain, its strengths and weaknesses. Every board is different. Every piece has something to teach you. The entries continued, part technical manual, part philosophy. Howard writing about dovetail joints and mortise and tenon connections, but also about patience, about the meditation of repetitive work, about finding meaning in creating something beautiful and useful. Near the end of the manual, a different kind of entry. 1992, started taking commissions again. Small things at first, cutting boards, picture frames. People in town remember me as the man who went bankrupt, but they're willing to give my work a chance. Eleanor says it's because the pieces speak for themselves. Quality doesn't need defending. Maybe that's the lesson. You can't erase the past, can't make people forget your failures. But you can build something new, piece by piece, until the new work matters more than the old mistakes. 10 years ago, I was wealthy and miserable. Today I'm poor and content. I have my hands, my tools, and my wife. I have work that means something. That's enough. That's more than enough. Caleb set the manual down, looking around the workshop. Scrap wood stacked in one corner. A box of sandpaper dried out but usable. Jars of finishing oil on a shelf. Everything he'd need to start working, to start building. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Mr. Harper? This is Bernard Whitley from Whitley's General Store in town. Heard you bought the Brennan place. If you need anything, stop by. We take care of our neighbors up here. Caleb stared at the message. He hadn't met anyone in town yet, had driven through once on his way to the cabin and back out for supplies. How did this Bernard person even know he existed? He typed back, "Thank you. I'll stop by soon." The response came immediately. Good. Been curious about who'd end up with Howard's cabin. That place has a history. Meant something to folks around here. Caleb pocketed his phone, thinking about Bernard's words. The cabin meant something, had a history. He was living in the middle of someone else's story, walking through rooms where Howard and Eleanor had rebuilt their lives from nothing. But maybe that was the point. Maybe Howard had left this place. The journals, the tools, the blueprints, not just as artifacts of his past, but as a guide for whoever came next. A roadmap for starting over. He spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning the workshop, sweeping out debris, wiping down surfaces, organizing tools. The work was mindless but satisfying, bringing order to chaos, revealing the bones of something functional beneath years of neglect. As evening approached, Caleb found himself standing at the workbench, a piece of scrap wood in his hands. He picked up one of Howard's planes, testing its weight, remembering the motion his father had taught him. The first pass was rough, unpracticed. The second was better. By the 10th, his muscles remembered the rhythm, the angle, the pressure. Wood curls fell away, revealing smooth grain beneath. The familiar smell of fresh-cut lumber filled the workshop. He didn't know what he was making, didn't have a plan, a blueprint. He was just working the wood, feeling it respond to his hands, finding the motion that had once been second nature. An hour passed. Then 2. When he finally stopped, he'd created nothing useful, just a board planed smooth on all sides, sanded carefully by hand. But holding it, feeling its weight and texture, Caleb felt something shift inside him. He could do this. He could build things. It wouldn't solve his problems overnight, wouldn't magically make him worthy of Sophie's trust or Patricia's approval, but it was a start, a foundation. He carried the board back to the cabin as darkness fell, setting it on the mantel above the fireplace. Evidence that he could still create something, even if it was small and simple and served no practical purpose. That night, reading more of Howard's journal by lamplight, Caleb came across an entry from 1988. Someone asked me today how I keep going after losing everything. They meant it as sympathy, but I heard it as judgment. How can you show your face after such failure? I told them, you keep going because stopping isn't an option. You keep going because the people who love you deserve your best effort. You keep going because failure isn't final unless you let it be. I'm not the man I was before the bankruptcy. I'm better, humbler, more grateful, more focused on what actually matters. Sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what's worth keeping. Eleanor and I, we're building something here. Not wealth, not reputation, just a life that feels true, that we can be proud of. One board at a time, one day at a time. Caleb closed the journal, his fingers tracing the smooth wood of the board he'd planned earlier. One board at a time, one day at a time. He had 5.5 weeks until the court date. 5.5 weeks to prove he could build something worth believing in. Outside, the Montana night was silent and vast. Inside the cabin, golden light from the cellar seeped through the floorboards, and a man who'd forgotten how to build remembered the first lesson his father had taught him. Start with one piece. Do it right, then add another. 2 weeks into living at the cabin, Caleb made his first trip into town. The drive took 40 minutes on dirt roads that turned to gravel, then finally to pavement as he approached what the locals generously called downtown, a strip of old buildings clustered around a single intersection. Whitley's General Store occupied a corner lot, its wooden sign weathered but sturdy. Caleb parked and went inside, finding the interior dimly lit and packed with everything from groceries to hardware supplies. Behind the counter stood a man in his 60s, grey-haired and solid, wearing flannel and a friendly expression. "You must be Caleb Harper." "I'm Bernard Whitley. How did you know?" Caleb asked, though he suspected the answer. "Small town, new face. Word traveled. Only one person bought Howard's cabin. Been keeping an eye on the place for years, hoping someone would give it the attention it deserves." Bernard extended his hand. "Welcome to the neighborhood such as it is." They shook. Bernard's grip was firm, calloused from years of work. "I needed supplies," Caleb said. "Wood glue, sandpaper, some basic groceries. Help yourself. Take what you need." Bernard gestured around the store. "We run a tab system here. Pay when you can. I don't have much right now. Nobody does. That's why we have the tab system." Bernard's expression was matter-of-fact, not pitying. "Howard did the same thing when he first moved up here. Eventually paid it all back, plus interest he insisted on adding, even though I told him not to. Good man, Howard. Eleanor, too." Caleb gathered his supplies, adding items to a basket. "What happened to them?" "The place was abandoned when I found it." Bernard's face grew somber. "Eleanor got sick, cancer. They left around 2003, moved closer to the city for treatment. She passed that same year. Howard followed about 2 years later. Heart attack, from what I heard. Some folks say it was a broken heart, and I don't doubt it. They were devoted to each other. They left everything behind. The furniture, tools, journals. Howard was like that. Didn't care much about possessions." Bernard rang up the supplies. $32? Put it on your tab?" Caleb nodded, grateful. He had $9 left to his name. "You doing okay up there?" Bernard asked. "Place needs work, I imagine. I'm managing, making repairs." "Found Howard's workshop." Bernard's eyes brightened. "You work with wood?" "Used to. My father was a carpenter. Taught me the basics before he passed. Howard was a master craftsman. Lost his business in the 80s, but that didn't take away his skill. Started making furniture again, one piece at a time. Folks around here still treasure what he made." Bernard pulled out a business card from beneath the counter. "My wife and we've been looking for someone who could make us a dining table. Custom work. Our 50th anniversary's coming up. If you're interested." Caleb took the card, stunned. I'm not sure I'm qualified. Howard's tools are good ones. His workshop is sound, and if you learned from your father, you've got the foundation. Rest is just practice, Bernard smiled. Think about it. No pressure. But if you decide you want the work, let me know. Caleb left the store with his supplies and Bernard's card, his mind spinning. A commission, actual work. It wouldn't pay much, couldn't, not in a town this small, but it was something. A start. Back at the cabin, he returned to the cellar, searching for more of Howard's story. He found it in a wooden recipe box tucked into a cabinet in the kitchen, painted with small flowers that had faded with time. Inside, recipe cards in Eleanor's handwriting. But these weren't just recipes, they were memories. Howard's pot roast made this, the night he smiled for the first time after the bankruptcy. March 1987. Took him 6 months to find joy again, but this meal helped. Sometimes comfort is a slow-cooked meal and someone who won't give up on you. Cinnamon rolls for hard mornings. For days when everything feels impossible. Make these, eat them warm. Remember that tough times pass. They always pass. We've survived worse. Eleanor's chicken soup, my mother's recipe. Made this for Howard when he had the flu in '89. He said it tasted like love. I suppose that's what cooking is. Putting love into something nourishing, feeding both body and soul, card after card, each one a small window into their life together. Eleanor's voice came through in every note, warm, practical, refusing to let hardship diminish joy. One card simply read, "When you're poor, food becomes celebration." We learned to make every meal matter. Caleb found himself trying one of the recipes that evening, the chicken soup. He had to improvise with limited ingredients, but he followed Eleanor's instructions, her voice somehow present in the small kitchen as he chopped vegetables and stirred the pot. The soup wasn't perfect, but it was good, nourishing, and making it, following another person's careful directions, connected him to this place in a way reading journal entries couldn't quite manage. He ate dinner slowly, savoring it, thinking about Eleanor writing those cards. Thinking about how she'd sustained Howard through his darkest times with small acts of care. Meals, encouragement, presence. Who had done that for him? After the divorce, after the job loss, who had shown up with soup and refused to let him drown in his failures? No one. He'd pushed people away, ashamed, convinced his problems were his alone to solve. And in isolating himself, he'd made everything harder. His phone rang. Sophie's number. Dad. Her voice was small, tentative. Hey, sweetheart. How are you? Okay, Mom said I could call you. A pause. She said you might not be able to see me for a while. Caleb's chest tightened. That's not true. I'm going to see you. I promise. Mom says you make promises you can't keep. The words hit hard because they were true. How many times had he promised Sophie things, visits, trips, time together, only to cancel because of work or money or the chaos of his collapsing life? I know I've let you down, he said carefully. More than once. But I'm trying to do better. I found a place to live, a cabin in Montana. It has a fireplace and big windows and... Can I visit? Not yet, but soon. I have to fix some things first. Make it safe and comfortable for you. You always say soon, I know. But this time I mean it. I'm going to show the judge that I can take care of you properly. That I'm stable, silence on the line. Then that you still love me? The question broke something in him. Sophie, I love you more than anything in this world. Never doubt that. Not for 1 second. Then why did you leave? I didn't leave you. Your mom and I, we couldn't stay married. But that has nothing to do with you. You're the best thing I've ever been part of creating. He could hear her breathing, considering his words. I have to go, she finally said. Mom's calling me. Okay, I love you. Love you too, Dad. The line went dead. Caleb sat in the silence, staring at his phone. 5 weeks until the court date. 5 weeks to prove he deserved to be Sophie's father in more than just name. He picked up Howard's journal again, flipping to an entry from 1990. Eleanor asked me today if I ever regret the choices we made. Giving up our daughter for adoption, losing the business, starting over from nothing. Caleb stopped, reread the line. Giving up our daughter for adoption? He flipped back through earlier entries, searching. Found it in an entry from 1977, before the cabin, before the bankruptcy. The baby is perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, Eleanor's eyes. We named her Julie, even though we won't be the ones to call her by it. The adoption agency says the family is good, stable, financially secure, everything we're not. Everything we can't give her. Eleanor can't stop crying. Neither can I, but we're 23 years old, drowning in debt, barely keeping ourselves afloat. How can we raise a child? How can we give her the life she deserves? The social worker says we're making the right choice, the loving choice. It doesn't feel loving. It feels like failure. Caleb's hands trembled as he turned pages, finding more references scattered through the years. The grief of giving up their daughter, the hope that she'd have a better life, the wondering if they'd made the right choice, and then in 1998, an entry that made his blood run cold. She found us, Julie, our daughter. She's 21 years old now, a grown woman. She sent a letter to our old address. Someone forwarded it here. She wants to meet us. Wants to know her birth parents. Says she had a good childhood, loving adoptive parents, but she needs to know where she came from. Eleanor and I talked all night. We don't know what to do. Caleb flipped forward frantically, searching for more entries about Julie. The journal continued through the late 90s, but Howard wrote less and less about their daughter. Just occasional references to the letters and the choice we have to make. Then, in a box in the cellar he hadn't opened yet, Caleb found them. Letters addressed to Howard and Eleanor Brennan, all marked Return to Sender, all from someone with the initials JB. He opened one. Dated 1999, Dear Howard and Eleanor, I don't understand why you won't respond to my letters. I'm not angry about the adoption. My parents gave me a wonderful life. I just want to meet you, to know you, to understand where I came from, please, just once. That's all I'm asking. Your daughter, Julie. Caleb sank into the rocking chair, letters in his lap, understanding washing over him. Howard and Eleanor had refused contact with their daughter, had returned every letter, maintained their distance even when Julie reached out. Why? The answer came in Howard's journal, an entry from 2003. Eleanor is dying. Stage 4 cancer. Maybe 6 months, the doctors say. Julie sent another letter. She has a daughter now, our granddaughter. She wants us to meet her, but we can't. If we let Julie into our lives now, she'll watch her birth mother die. She'll connect with us only to lose us. Better to maintain the distance. Better to let her remember the life she built with her real parents, the ones who raised her, loved her, were there for every moment we missed. We're leaving the cabin, going to the city for Eleanor's treatment. We won't be coming back. I hope whoever finds this place understands. We weren't rejecting Julie. We were protecting her. Caleb closed the journal, his eyes burning. Howard and Eleanor hadn't abandoned their daughter out of cruelty or indifference. They'd done it out of love, the same impossible, painful love that had made them give her up for adoption in the first place, protecting her from pain, even at the cost of their own hearts. He thought about Sophie, about the judge's upcoming decision, about his own desperate attempts to prove he was worthy of his daughter's trust. What would he sacrifice to protect her? What painful choices would he make if he believed they were in her best interest? Outside, night had fallen completely. The cabin was dark, except for lamplight, and the golden glow seeping through the floorboards, Howard's sunrise window, his symbol of hope and new beginnings. Caleb added wood to the fireplace, stoking the flames. Then he pulled out Bernard's business card and stared at it, a dining table. Custom work! Something beautiful and lasting for two people, celebrating 50 years together. He could do this. He would do this, not just for the money, though he desperately needed it, but because Howard had shown him how, one piece at a time, one day at a time, building something that mattered. Tomorrow he'd start. Tonight, he'd read more about a couple who'd lost everything and found something better in the losing. 1 month into living at the cabin, Caleb had established a new life. Not a comfortable one, not secure, but something resembling purpose. He woke with the sun, worked in Howard's workshop until his hands ached, and fell asleep reading journal entries by lamplight. The workshop had become his sanctuary. He'd cleaned it thoroughly, organized every tool, swept the floor until the old wood planks gleamed. Howard's tools felt like extensions of his own hands now. The planes, the chisels, the hand saws that required patience and precision. On the workbench, he'd found another of Howard's notebooks. Not a journal, but a workshop manual filled with detailed drawings and philosophical notes about the craft. A craftsman rushes nothing. Quality takes time. Life takes time. The world demands speed. Everything fast, everything cheap, everything disposable. Resist this. Make things that last. Make things that matter. When you work with wood, you're working with something that was once alive. It grew for decades, maybe centuries, before becoming material for your hands. Respect that. Learn its grain, its character. Every board is different. Every piece teaches you something if you're willing to listen. Caleb had started small, cutting boards first, simple rectangles of maple and walnut that he could finish in a day. He'd taken 6 of them to Bernard's store, not expecting much. They'd sold within a week. Bernard called him with the news. Folks appreciate quality work. Haven't seen craftsmanship like this since Howard was making pieces. Can you make more? Caleb made more. Cutting boards, then picture frames, then small boxes with dovetail joints. Each piece took hours of careful work, but Howard's manual guided him through techniques he'd forgotten or never fully learned. The repetitive motions became meditative. Sand, shape, finish, repeat. The money wasn't much. $40 here, $60 there. But it was honest work, and it was growing. More importantly, it was proof. Proof he could build something. Proof he could contribute. He kept meticulous records in a notebook. Every sale, every expense, every hour worked. Documentation for the court hearing. Evidence of stability and commitment. 3 weeks before the court date. Bernard stopped by the cabin with a request. Been thinking about that dining table, he said, standing in the workshop doorway. My wife's birthday is next month. Our 50th anniversary is the month after. I'd like to commission the table if you're willing. Something special, something that'll last another 50 years. Caleb set down the plane he'd been using. I've never made anything that large before. Howard's manual has plans for tables. I've seen them. Bernard stepped inside, running his hand along the workbench. This is solid work, what you've been doing. The cutting boards, the frames, people notice quality. They're asking about you. What would you pay? Caleb asked, trying to keep his voice steady. $300. Half up front, half on delivery. $300. More than he'd made in the entire month. Enough to show the judge he had steady income, that he was building a business. I'll do it, Caleb said. Bernard handed him an envelope with cash. Take your time. Do it right. That's what matters. After Bernard left, Caleb opened Howard's manual to the section on tables. Detailed drawings showed different styles: farmhouse, craftsman, contemporary. Notes in the margins explained joinery techniques, wood selection, finishing methods. One notation stood out: a table is where families gather, where they eat, talk, celebrate, mourn, live. Build it accordingly. Make it worthy of the memories it will hold. Caleb spent 2 days planning. He sketched designs, calculated measurements, made lists of materials. The work was exacting, requiring precision he wasn't sure he possessed. But Howard's notes guided him, and his father's voice echoed in his memory. Measure twice, cut once, take your time. He drove to a lumber yard 2 hours away, spending Bernard's advance on wood. Select-grade oak, kiln-dried and beautiful. The kind of material that deserved respect, that demanded quality work in return. Back at the workshop, he began the slow process of milling the lumber. Each board needed to be planned flat, cut to size, allowed to acclimate to the workshop's humidity. No rushing, no shortcuts. As he worked, he thought about Bernard and his wife, 50 years together. What had they endured? What fights had they survived? What losses had they weathered? And still here, still committed, still wanting to celebrate with a table that would last another lifetime. He thought about Howard and Eleanor. Their marriage hadn't been easy. Bankruptcy, grief, impossible choices. But they'd chosen each other every day, built a life together from ruins, found contentment in simplicity. He thought about his own failed marriage. Had he ever fought for it the way Howard fought for his life with Eleanor? Or had he let it collapse at the first sign of real trouble, too proud or too scared to do the hard work of staying? That evening, Sophie called again. "Dad, Mom says the court thing is soon. 3 weeks, Caleb confirmed, his chest tightening. What if the judge says I can't see you? That won't happen, but what if it does? He set down his tools, giving her his full attention. Sophie, listen to me. I'm doing everything I can to prove I'm a good father. I have a home now. I'm working, making furniture. I'm building a life that has room for you in it. Making furniture. Like carpentry? Like your grandfather, my dad. He taught me when I was young, and I'm remembering how. It's good work. Honest work. Can you make me something? The question caught him off guard. Like what? I don't know. Something small. So I can keep it and remember you're thinking about me. His throat tightened. Of course. What would you like? A box? For my special things? I can do that. I'll make it beautiful. I promise. After they hung up, Caleb pulled out a piece of cherry wood he'd been saving. The grain was gorgeous, tight and straight, perfect for a small project. He sketched a design for a jewelry box with a hinged lid and a hidden compartment inside. He worked on it late into the night by lamplight, taking extreme care with every cut and joint. This wasn't just practice. This was a promise made tangible, a way to show Sophie that he was thinking of her, working for her, becoming someone worthy of her trust. The box took shape slowly. Dovetail joints at the corners, brass hinges for the lid, a velvet lining he'd found in one of Eleanor's sewing supplies. Inside, a hidden drawer that released with a small wooden catch. A secret space for a young girl's treasures. He carved her initials into the bottom. SH, and finished the whole piece with oil that brought out the cherry's rich color. It was the finest thing he'd made. Small but perfect, complete. He set it aside to dry, planning to mail it before the court date. Something for Sophie to hold, to know he was serious about his promises this time. The work on Bernard's table continued. Caleb spent hours at the workbench, cutting mortises and tenons for the base, planing the tabletop boards to perfect flatness, testing joints to ensure they fit precisely. Howard's manual was always open beside him, offering guidance and philosophy in equal measure. Rush nothing. The wood knows when you're impatient. It will show in the final piece, gaps that shouldn't exist, joints that don't quite fit. Take your time. The work will tell you when it's ready. 2 weeks before the court date, Caleb discovered something new in the workshop. A rocking chair, half finished, pushed into a corner and covered with a tarp. He uncovered it carefully, examining the work. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Curves that flowed naturally, joints that were nearly invisible, detail work that showed hundreds of hours of patient labor. But it was incomplete. The rockers were attached, the seat was in place, but the back needed final shaping and the whole piece needed sanding and finishing. Why had Howard abandoned it? He found the answer in the workshop manual, a note tucked between pages near the back, "For the granddaughter I'll never meet." Started this when Julie wrote that she'd had a daughter. Thought maybe someday I could give it to them. But Eleanor is sick, and we're running out of time. Better to leave it unfinished than to force contact that would only bring pain. If someone finds this chair, finish it. Give it to someone who needs it. Let it hold the love I couldn't express to my own grandchild. Caleb ran his hand over the smooth wood, feeling the care Howard had put into every curve and line. The chair was meant to be a gift of love, abandoned to protect that same love from the pain of loss. He thought about Sophie, about the jewelry box drying on the workbench, about the ways people tried to show love through the things they made, the care they poured into creation. He made a decision. He would finish the rocking chair. Not for Sophie, she was too old for it now, but for someone, maybe for Bernard's future great-grandchild. Maybe for a stranger who needed it. But he would complete what Howard had started. Honor the intention, even if the original recipient would never know. That night, reading Howard's journal, he found an entry from 2002, 10 years since Julie first contacted us. 10 years of returned letters, of maintaining distance, of breaking our own hearts to protect hers. Eleanor says we made the right choice. I believe her because I have to, but I wonder if Julie understands. I wonder if she thinks we don't love her. I wonder if someday she'll know the truth, that we loved her enough to let her go twice. Once at birth, and again when she tried to return. The rocking chair sits unfinished in my workshop. Maybe that's fitting. Some love remains incomplete. Some gestures go unmade. We do the best we can with impossible choices. Caleb closed the journal, looking around the cabin. This place was filled with incomplete gestures, unfinished expressions of love. Howard's rocking chair. The letters returned to Julie. The life cut short by Eleanor's illness and Howard's broken heart. But maybe that was the point of finding this place. Not just to learn from Howard's success, but to complete what he'd left undone. To honor the intention by finishing the work. Outside, the night was cold and clear. Inside, lamplight flickered against log walls, and golden light seeped through the floorboards from the cellar window below. Caleb sat in the workshop until late, planning how he'd finish the rocking chair after completing Bernard's table. One project at a time, one piece at a time, building something that mattered, something that would last, something that carried love forward even when the original builder was gone. He picked up his tools and returned to work on the table. Howard's words echoing in his mind, "Rush nothing. The work will tell you when it's ready." He had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prove he could build a life worth believing in. 10 days before the court hearing, Caleb made a discovery that changed everything. He was organizing the cellar, creating proper storage for the items he'd been exploring. The journals, photo albums, Eleanor's recipe box. In the darkest corner, behind a stack of old crates, he found a metal box he'd missed before. Heavy, locked with a simple padlock that had rusted over the years. He carried it upstairs, studying it in better light. No key visible anywhere. He could force it open, but something made him hesitate. Howard had locked this box deliberately, had hidden it away. Whatever was inside mattered. That afternoon, while working on Bernard's table, his mind kept returning to the locked box. What had Howard protected so carefully? What had he hidden in the darkness? The table was coming together beautifully. The legs were attached, the apron fitted perfectly. The top was nearly ready for final sanding. Another week of work, maybe less, and it would be complete. Bernard stopped by every few days to check progress, and each visit his smile grew wider. "My wife is going to cry when she sees this," he said, running his hand over the smooth oak. "It's exactly what I imagined. Better even. It's good wood," Caleb said, deflecting the compliment. "Howard's tools make it easier. Tools don't create craftsmanship. People do. Howard knew that. You're learning it." Bernard pulled an envelope from his jacket. "The other half of the payment. You've earned it." Caleb took the money, grateful and uncomfortable in equal measure. He wasn't used to being praised, to having his work valued. The past year had taught him to expect failure, not recognition. After Bernard left, Caleb returned to the cellar, drawn back to the locked box. He searched more thoroughly this time, looking for a key. Nothing in the obvious places. No hooks on the wall, no small containers that might hold one. Then he remembered the rocking chair. He went to the workshop, examining the unfinished piece more carefully. Howard had been meticulous about hidden details, secret compartments in boxes, decorative elements that served dual purposes. Would he have hidden something in the chair itself? Caleb ran his hands along every surface, every joint, every curve. And there, in the joint where the armrest met the back support, slightly loose, he felt something shift. He worked it carefully, not wanting to damage the wood, and a small wooden plug came free. Inside the hollow space, wrapped in oiled paper, was a brass key. His heart hammered as he returned to the cabin, to the locked box on the kitchen table. The key slid in smoothly, clicked, turned. The lock opened. Inside, a bundle of letters wrapped with twine. Beneath them, official documents, a birth certificate, adoption papers, medical records. And at the bottom, photographs of a baby girl. Caleb's hands shook as he untied the letters. They were all addressed to Howard and Eleanor Brennan, all from the same sender, JB, Seattle, Washington. All marked, return to sender. He opened the first letter, postmarked 1998. "Dear Howard and Eleanor, my name is Julie Brennan. I was born on March 3rd, 1977, and adopted 3 days later. My adoptive parents were wonderful. They gave me everything, loved me completely. But I've always known I was adopted, and now that I'm 21, I need to find you. I'm not angry. I'm not looking for explanations or apologies. I just want to know you, to understand where I came from, to meet the people who gave me life. Please write back, please. Julie Caleb read through more letters, each one more desperate than the last. Julie writing about graduating college, about getting engaged, about wanting Howard and Eleanor at her wedding. Julie writing about getting married anyway, about wondering if they'd received her invitations, about hoping they'd change their minds. Then, dated 2001, Dear Howard and Eleanor, I had a daughter. Her name is Charlotte. She's beautiful, perfect. She has your eyes, at least I think she does, based on the one photograph from the adoption file. I want her to know her grandparents. I want to tell her about you. But I can't because you won't respond. You won't even acknowledge that I exist. I've tried to understand. Maybe you moved on, built a new life, don't want reminders of the daughter you gave away. Maybe you never think about me at all, but I think about you every day. I wonder about you every day. And now I have a daughter who will never know where half of her family comes from. This is my last letter. If you don't respond, I'll stop trying. I'll accept that you don't want contact. But please know I would have loved knowing you. I would have welcomed you into my life. Whatever your reasons for staying away, I forgive you. Your daughter, Julie. The letter was dated October 2001. 2 years before Howard and Eleanor left the cabin, Caleb set the letters down, his vision blurred. Julie had forgiven them, had released them from guilt they'd carried for decades. And they'd never known, because they'd never opened her letters. He picked up the adoption papers, reading through the official language. Julie Marie Brennan, born to Eleanor Ann Brennan at St. Mary's Hospital. Father Howard James Brennan, adoptive parents' names redacted. Adoption finalized April 1977. The medical records showed Eleanor's difficult pregnancy, the complications during delivery, the doctor's warnings against future pregnancies. At 23, with a failed business and mounting debt, Howard and Eleanor had made the hardest choice of their lives. And then, 21 years later, when Julie reached out, they'd made it again. Caleb returned to Howard's journal, flipping to entries from the late 90s and early 2000s, found what he was looking for, Howard's justification, his reasoning. 998, she found us. Our daughter. Eleanor and I have talked for days about what to do. Every instinct says to respond, to meet her, to know her. But what then? We're not the parents who raised her. We're not the people who were there for her first steps, her graduations, her heartbreaks. We're ghosts from her past, and opening that door might cause more harm than good. We're returning her letter unread. It's cruel, but it's kinder than the alternative. Better she thinks we don't care than she gets attached only to lose us later. 9. Another letter came. Eleanor cried all night. I don't know if we're doing the right thing anymore, but we've committed to this path, and changing course now would be worse than maintaining it. 2001. Julie wrote that she had a daughter, a granddaughter, a child we'll never meet. Eleanor wants to respond this time, wants to at least send a card, acknowledge the baby's existence. But I convinced her not to. If we open that door even a crack, it will hurt more when we have to close it again. And we will have to close it. Eleanor's health is declining. The doctors are concerned. 1003. Eleanor has cancer. Stage 4, inoperable, 6 months, maybe a year. Julie sent another letter. Eleanor wanted to open it, but I stopped her. They told her, if we let Julie into our lives now, she'll watch her birth mother die. She'll get to know us just in time to lose us. Better to maintain the distance. Better to protect her from that pain. We're leaving the cabin, going to the city for treatment. We won't be back. Caleb closed the journal, understanding settling over him like a weight. Howard hadn't been cruel. He'd been protective to the point of self-destruction. He'd broken his own heart over and over to spare Julie from pain that might not have broken hers. Had he been right? Or had he robbed Julie of precious time with her birth parents, however brief? There was no way to know. Howard and Eleanor were both gone. The question would remain forever unanswered, but Julie was still alive. Caleb pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly. He could find her. In this age of internet searches and social media, tracking down someone with a name and city wasn't difficult, should he? Did he have the right to intrude on her life, to deliver news about parents who'd refused to know her? What if she'd moved on, made peace with their rejection? What if opening this wound would cause more harm than healing? He thought about Sophie, but the ways parents tried to protect their children, sometimes getting it wrong, sometimes causing pain while trying to prevent it. About how love could manifest as distance, as silence, as impossible choices that seemed right in the moment but might haunt forever. He thought about the rocking chair in the workshop, Howard's unfinished gesture of love, abandoned because he believed Julie was better off not knowing. But people deserve the truth, deserve to understand that rejection sometimes masked love, that silence sometimes screamed devotion, that walking away sometimes meant staying present in the only way you knew how. Caleb made his decision. He would find Julie. He would tell her everything, the journals, the letters returned unread, the rocking chair, the cellar full of artifacts that showed how much Howard and Eleanor had thought about her, missed her, loved her from a distance they believed was necessary. He would give her the truth her parents had kept hidden and let her decide what to do with it. But first, the court hearing. First, his own fight for his daughter. Then he would reach out to Julie, complete the circle Howard had left broken. That night, he worked late on Bernard's table, applying the first coat of finish. The oil soaked into the oak, bringing out the grain's beauty, transforming raw wood into something that gleamed with warmth and care. 1 week until the hearing. 1 week to finish the table, prepare his evidence, practice his testimony. 1 week to prove he was worth believing in. Outside, winter was settling into the Montana mountains. Inside the cabin, lamplight flickered and golden light seeped through floorboards, and a man worked steadily toward redemption. Guided by a stranger's unfinished story and determined to complete what Howard had left undone, the table would be finished in time. The court would make its decision, and afterward, whether he won or lost, Caleb would reach out to Julie and deliver the message her parents had been too afraid to send. Some circles needed closing. Some truths deserved telling. Some love needed to find its way home, even decades late. Even after death had claimed the ones who'd felt it first and strongest. 5 days before the court hearing, Caleb finished Bernard's table. He'd applied the final coat of oil the night before. And now, in morning light streaming through the workshop windows, the piece glowed. The oak's grain flowed like water across the surface. The joints were invisible. The legs stood strong and true. It was the finest work he'd ever done, not just technically sound, but beautiful. Something that would hold 50 years of meals and conversations and memories. Bernard arrived at noon with his truck. When he saw the table, he stopped in the doorway, speechless. "It's perfect," he finally said, his voice thick. Howard would be proud. They loaded it carefully, securing it with blankets. Bernard handed Caleb the final payment, plus an extra $50. "For excellence. My wife is going to treasure this." After Bernard left, Caleb stood in the empty workshop, feeling the weight of accomplishment. He'd completed something significant, had proven to himself and soon to a judge that he could build, could finish what he started, could create value. He turned his attention to the rocking chair. 4 days until the hearing. Enough time to complete Howard's abandoned project. He examined the piece carefully, planning the remaining work. The back needed final shaping, curves that would cradle whoever sat there, support that would last generations. Then complete sanding, starting with rough grit and working up to smoothness like glass. Finally finish, multiple coats of oil, hand-rubbed to bring out the wood's natural beauty. As he worked the back piece with a spoke shave, following the grain, removing material in careful curls, something shifted. A joint loosened slightly, revealing a hollow space he hadn't noticed before. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a piece of yellowed paper. Caleb set down his tools, hands trembling as he unfolded it. Howard's handwriting, shaky now, dated 2003. To whoever finishes this chair, I built this for my granddaughter, Charlotte. Julie's daughter. The grandchild I'll never meet because I was too afraid, or too convinced of my own righteousness, to respond when my daughter reached out. Eleanor and I told ourselves we were protecting Julie, that staying away was an act of love, that she was better off without us, without the pain of knowing us, just to lose us. But I wonder now, with Eleanor dying and my own time running short, if we were really protecting her at all, or if we were just protecting ourselves from the messiness of connection, from the vulnerability of letting someone see our failures. I'll never know if we made the right choice. The one certainty is that this chair will never rock my granddaughter to sleep. It will never hold Julie while she sings lullabies. It will never be part of the family I gave away twice, once at birth and again when they tried to return. If you're reading this, finish the chair. Make it beautiful. Give it to someone who needs it. Let it hold the love I couldn't express, the connection I was too afraid to make. And if you can find Julie Brennan, Seattle, tell her the truth. Tell her we thought about her every day. Tell her we loved her enough to let her go, and then loved her too much to come back. Tell her we were wrong. Tell her we were wrong. Forgive us, Julie. Forgive me. Howard Caleb read the note 3 times, his chest tight. Howard had known. At the end, he'd understood that his protection had been cowardice, that his silence had been selfishness dressed as sacrifice. He died carrying that knowledge, unable to undo the choice, but he'd left instructions. A request, a final chance to set things right. Caleb set the note aside carefully and returned to work on the chair with renewed purpose. This wasn't just finishing an abandoned project anymore. This was honoring a dying man's last request. This was completing a circle that Howard had broken. He worked through the afternoon and into evening, shaping, sanding, perfecting. Every curve, every surface, every detail received his complete attention. This chair would be flawless. It would be worthy of the love Howard had meant it to carry. As darkness fell, he applied the first coat of finish, watching the wood transform under his hands. Cherry grain emerged in rich reds and browns. The joints disappeared into seamless flow. The curves invited touch and comfort. He stepped back, studying the piece. Nearly complete. One more day of finish coats, then it would be done. His phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Judge wants to meet Sophie before the hearing. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. You can be there if you want. His heart raced. Meeting Sophie before the hearing, that was good, wasn't it? It meant the judge was considering his petition seriously, wanted to see their relationship firsthand. He texted back, I'll be there. Where? Family court building. Conference room. B. Caleb looked around the workshop, at the chair drying, at Howard's tools arranged precisely, at the space where Bernard's table had stood. Evidence of what he'd built. Proof of change. But would it be enough? That night, unable to sleep, he searched for Julie Brennan online. Found her on social media, a woman in her late 40s, kind eyes, warm smile. Her profile showed photos of a teenage girl, presumably Charlotte. Pictures of a comfortable life in Seattle. A husband, a home. Julie had built a good life. Had she forgiven Howard and Eleanor, as her final letter suggested? Or did anger still simmer beneath the surface, protected by the distance of years? He drafted a message, deleted it. Drafted another. How did you tell someone their birth parents had loved them, but been too afraid to show it? How did you explain decades of silence, of returned letters, of love expressed through absence? He decided to wait until after the hearing. First, settle his own situation with Sophie. Then reach out to Julie with Howard's message and the completed rocking chair. Morning came too quickly. Caleb dressed in his best clothes, still worn, still old, but clean and presentable. He packed a folder with documentation, his sales records from the furniture pieces, letters of recommendation from Bernard and other customers, photos of the cabin showing its improvement, bank statements proving modest but steady income. The drive to the courthouse took 2 hours. He arrived early, sat in the parking lot rehearsing what he'd say, how he'd present himself. Calm, responsible, changed. At 1:50, he entered the building. Patricia was already there with Sophie standing outside conference room B. Sophie's face lit up when she saw him. "Dad!" She ran to him, and he caught her in a hug that squeezed his heart. She felt bigger than he remembered, older, growing up in the months since he'd held her last. "I missed you, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "I missed you too." She pulled back, studying his face. "You look different, happier." "I am happier. I found a place to live, found work I love. Found myself again, I think." Patricia cleared her throat. "The judge is ready." They entered the conference room together. An oddly normal family scene, despite everything that had broken between them. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Henderson, sat at the head of a table. She gestured for them to sit. "Sophie," Judge Henderson said gently, "I want to talk to you about your dad." "About what you want." "There's no wrong answer here. Just honesty." Sophie glanced at Caleb, then back at the judge. "I want to see him more. I want to visit his cabin. He says it has a fireplace. What if visiting means traveling far from home? Your dad lives pretty remotely now. I don't mind. Mom could drive me partway, maybe. Or I could take a bus when I'm older." Sophie's voice was small but determined. "I just want to see him, to know he's okay, to know he didn't forget about me." Judge Henderson turned to Caleb. "Mr. Harper, you've been through significant life changes in the past few months. Tell me why you're ready for expanded visitation now when you weren't 6 months ago." Caleb took a breath, choosing his words carefully. 6 months ago, I was drowning. I'd lost my job, my home, my sense of who I was. I was so focused on what I'd lost that I couldn't build anything new. I was failing Sophie because I was failing myself." He pulled out his folder, spreading documents on the table. "This is what I've built since then. A furniture business. Custom pieces crafted by hand. It's not much yet, but it's growing. It's honest work, and it's mine." He showed photos of the cabin, of his workshop, of the pieces he'd created. "I learned this from my father. He was a carpenter, taught me the trade when I was young. I'd forgotten what that meant, working with your hands, creating something that lasts." "I remembered at this cabin. Found myself there." Patricia spoke quietly. "He's different. I can see it. I'm not sure how long it will last." "It will last," Caleb interrupted, meeting her eyes. "Because I understand now what matters. Not wealth or status or any of the things I thought defined success. What matters is showing up, being present, building something real for the people you love." He turned back to Sophie. "I'm not perfect. I'm still figuring things out. But I promise you, I will show up. Every visit, every call, every moment you give me. I won't waste it. I won't let you down again." Judge Henderson studied him for a long moment. "The hearing is in 4 days. I'll make my decision then, based on everything I've seen and heard. But Mr. Harper, this meeting was promising. Your daughter loves you. Don't make me regret believing in second chances." "You won't," Caleb said. "I promise." They left the courthouse together, and Patricia allowed him an hour with Sophie at a nearby park. They sat on swings, talking about the cabin, about his woodworking, about the life he was building. "I made you something," he said, pulling out the cherry jewelry box from his truck. "For your special things." Sophie opened it, gasping at the hidden compartment. "Dad, this is beautiful. Your grandfather, my dad, he taught me that what you make with your hands carries meaning. This carries my promise to you, that I'm here, that I'm not leaving again." She hugged the box to her chest, then hugged him. "I believe you." Those 3 words meant more than any judge's ruling ever could. 3 days until the hearing. Caleb worked on the rocking chair with singular focus, applying coat after coat of oil finish, hand-rubbing each layer until the wood glowed like living fire. Between coats, he rehearsed what he'd say to the judge, organized his documentation, prepared for every question he might face. But his mind kept returning to Howard's note. "Tell her we were wrong." He drafted a letter to Julie, writing and rewriting until the words felt right. "Dear Julie, my name is Caleb Harper. I bought your parents' cabin in Montana 6 months ago. I found their story in journals, photographs, and letters they left behind. I found your letters, too, the ones they returned unopened. Your parents loved you. I know that sounds hollow given their silence, but it's true. They thought they were protecting you by staying away." Howard wrote at the end that they were wrong. He asked me to tell you the truth. They thought about you every day. Howard built a rocking chair for your daughter Charlotte, but never finished it because he was too afraid to reach out. I'm completing it now. If you want it, I'll send it to you. If you want to know more about them, I have their journals, their photos, their whole story. They weren't perfect. They made mistakes. But they loved you in the only way they knew how, even if that way was flawed. I'm sorry it took this long for their message to reach you. He printed the letter but didn't mail it yet. After the hearing, after he knew whether his own fight for Sophie had succeeded or failed, 2 days before the hearing, Bernard stopped by the workshop, wanted to check on you before the big day, he said, examining the rocking chair. This is extraordinary work. Howard would be amazed. It was his design. I just finished what he started. That's what we all do, isn't it? Finish what others started. Build on what came before. Bernard ran his hand along the chair's curved arm. My wife cried when she saw the table. Said it was the most beautiful gift I'd ever given her. That's because of you. It's because of Howard's tools, his teaching. It's because you showed up and did the work. Bernard's voice was firm. Don't diminish that. You could have bought this cabin and given up. Instead, you built something that matters. After Bernard left, Caleb applied the final coat of finish to the rocking chair. Tomorrow it would be complete, Howard's last gesture of love. Finished 40 years after the daughter's birth. 20 years after her attempt at connection. 2 decades too late to matter to the people it was meant for, but maybe it could matter to Julie. Maybe knowing her parents had thought about her, had built something for her child, had carried love even through silence. Maybe that would bring some measure of peace. The day before the hearing, Caleb drove to town and bought his first new shirt in 6 months. Nothing fancy. Just a simple button-down that fit properly, made him look like a man who had his life together. He got a haircut, shaved carefully, tried to see himself the way a judge would see him. He looked different than he had 6 months ago. Leaner from physical work, but stronger, calmer, more grounded. The desperate edge had faded from his eyes, replaced by something steadier. That evening, he sat on the cabin's porch with Howard's journal, reading the final entries. 1003 April, Eleanor passed this morning, peacefully in her sleep, holding my hand. The last thing she said was, "Tell Julie." I didn't get to ask what she wanted me to tell her. Maybe everything. Maybe just that we loved her. I'm alone now. The cabin feels empty without Eleanor. Everything feels empty. But I made her a promise to keep living, to not follow her too quickly. So I'll try 2003 June. Can't stay at the cabin. Too many memories. Too much silence. I'm moving to the city, closer to medical care, closer to the end. I'm leaving everything behind, the journals, the letters, the life we built. Maybe someone will find it someday. Maybe it will mean something to them. Maybe our story, with all its mistakes and regrets, will help someone else choose differently. If Julie ever reads this, we loved you. We were wrong to stay away. Forgive us, that was the last entry. 2 months later, according to Bernard, Howard had died of a heart attack. Alone, far from the cabin that held his history, carrying regrets he'd never had the courage to resolve. Caleb closed the journal, his throat tight. He thought about Sophie, about the hearing tomorrow, about all the ways he'd failed as a father and all the ways he was trying to rebuild. Would he make Howard's mistakes? Would he let fear or pride or misguided protection keep him from his daughter? Would he die with regrets about love unexpressed, connections unmade? No. Whatever the judge decided tomorrow, Caleb would keep showing up. Keep fighting. Keep building the relationship with Sophie one piece at a time. The way Howard had taught him to build furniture, with patience, care, and commitment to something that would last. He packed his folder of evidence, pressed his new shirt, set his alarm early. Tomorrow would determine everything. Tomorrow he'd stand before a judge and argue for the right to be his daughter's father in more than just name. The cabin was quiet around him. Golden light seeped through the floorboards from the stained glass window below, Howard's symbol of new beginnings. Still glowing after all these years, Caleb sat in the darkness, feeling the weight of the moment. Tomorrow, one way or another, his future would be decided. Either he'd won his fight for redemption, or he'd have to find another way forward. But regardless of the outcome, he'd honor Howard's final request. He'd mail the letter to Julie. He'd complete the circle that Howard had left broken. He'd prove that love could find its way home, even decades late, even through mistakes and silence and all the ways people failed each other while trying to do right. Outside, the Montana wilderness stretched vast and indifferent. Inside, a man prepared to fight for what mattered most, guided by a stranger's story and determined not to make the same mistakes. Tomorrow. Everything would change tomorrow. The courthouse waiting room smelled of floor polish and old coffee. Caleb sat in a plastic chair, his folder of documents on his lap, watching other families cycle through their own hearings. Divorces, custody battles, people fighting over the pieces of broken relationships. Patricia arrived with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who carried an expensive briefcase. Patricia herself looked tired, older than when they'd divorced. The anger that had defined their interactions for the past year seemed muted now, replaced by something more like resignation. "Caleb," she said, nodding. "Not warm, but not hostile either, Patricia." They sat in silence until the bailiff called their case. Harper custody modification. Conference room 3. The room was smaller than Caleb expected. Judge Henderson sat at the head of a table, reading through a file, his file. She looked up as they entered, her expression neutral. "Mr. Harper, Ms. Harper, please sit." Caleb took his seat, acutely aware of everything. The fluorescent lights humming above, Patricia's attorney shuffling papers, the weight of his folder in his hands. "I've reviewed your petition for expanded visitation," Judge Henderson began, looking at Caleb. "I've also reviewed the reports from your caseworker, your financial statements, and testimony from the preliminary meeting with Sophie. Let's start with the basics. Are you currently employed?" "Yes, Your Honor. I run a custom furniture business from my home workshop. I build pieces by hand, tables, chairs, cabinets. It's steady work. How much do you earn?" "It varies. Between $800 and $1,200 a month right now." Growing steadily, Patricia's attorney leaned forward. "Your Honor, that's barely above poverty level. My client is concerned about Mr. Harper's ability to provide adequate support." "I'm not asking for reduced support payments," Caleb interrupted. "I'm meeting my obligations. I'm asking for more time with my daughter." Judge Henderson raised her hand for silence. "Mr. Harper, tell me about your living situation." "I own a cabin in northern Montana, 3 acres, fully functional. I've made significant repairs, new roof sections, upgraded plumbing, general maintenance. It's modest but solid, safe. And your history of instability. 6 months ago you were unemployed, effectively homeless. 6 months ago I was drowning." Caleb met her eyes. "I'd lost everything and didn't know how to rebuild. Then I found this cabin, and with it, journals from the previous owner. A man named Howard Brennan, who'd also lost everything. His business, his reputation, his savings. But he rebuilt. He showed me how. He opened his folder, sliding photographs across the table. This is my workshop. These are pieces I've made. This is a dining table, commissioned by a local business owner for his 50th wedding anniversary. This is a rocking chair I'm completing from plans the previous owner left behind." Judge Henderson studied the photos. "Impressive craftsmanship. My father taught me woodworking before he died. I'd forgotten what that meant. Creating something with your hands, building something that lasts. The cabin reminded me. Howard's journals reminded me. That's what I want to give Sophie, a father who builds instead of runs, who shows up instead of disappears." Patricia spoke quietly. "He is different, Your Honor, I can see it." "I'm not sure I trust it yet." "You don't have to trust it," Caleb said, turning to her. "You just have to give me a chance to prove it. Sophie deserves a father who tries, who fights for her, who doesn't give up when things get hard." Judge Henderson tapped her pen against the file. "Ms. Harper's attorney is right that your income is modest. But Mr. Harper is meeting his support obligations, and income isn't the only measure of fitness as a parent." She turned to Patricia. "What are your concerns specifically?" Patricia hesitated. "That he'll disappoint her again. That he'll make promises he can't keep. That Sophie will get attached to this new version of him. And then he'll revert to the old version, the one who couldn't hold a job, couldn't pay bills." Couldn't show up when it mattered. The words stung because they were true, or had been true. Caleb took a breath. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, he said. I'll probably make plenty of them. But I can promise I won't give up. I won't run. I won't let Sophie wonder if I'm thinking about her, because I'll be there to tell her I am. Judge Henderson looked at Patricia. You've had primary custody for 2 years. How has Sophie been? She's fine, doing well in school, but she asks about her father constantly. She wants more time with him, and you oppose this because? I don't oppose it. Patricia's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm scared for her. I don't want her hurt again. The room fell silent. Judge Henderson closed the file, folding her hands on top of it. Mr. Harper, you understand that this is a probationary arrangement, that if you fail to meet your obligations, financial or parental, we'll revisit this decision. Yes, Your Honor. And you're prepared to maintain your current support payments while also covering costs associated with expanded visitation. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Henderson nodded slowly. Then here is my ruling. Judge Henderson opened the file again, reviewing something on the first page. The silence stretched, each second feeling like an hour. Caleb forced himself to breathe steadily, to maintain composure even as his heart hammered. I've read Sophie's statement, the judge said finally. A 9-year-old girl who clearly loves both her parents and wants more time with her father. I've reviewed Mr. Harper's financial records, his character references, and the documentation of his business. I've also considered Ms. Harper's concerns about stability and reliability. She looked at Caleb directly. Mr. Harper, 6 months ago, I would not have granted this petition. Your situation was too unstable, too uncertain. But people can change. The question is whether the change is real or temporary. Caleb met her gaze, saying nothing. This wasn't the moment for speeches. I'm granting expanded visitation, Judge Henderson said. Every other weekend, 1 month each summer, alternating major holidays. You'll maintain current support payments and cover transportation costs for visitation. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. If you fail to meet these obligations, if you miss scheduled visits, fall behind on support, or demonstrate instability, we will revisit this decision. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. His voice was steady despite the emotion swelling in his chest. Miss Harper, do you understand that this is a court order? That you must facilitate these visits and cannot interfere with Mr. Harper's parenting time? Patricia nodded. I understand, Your Honor. Good. The first visit will begin this weekend. Judge Henderson closed the file. Mr. Harper, don't make me regret this decision. Your daughter deserves better than broken promises. She won't get broken promises from me. Not anymore. Then we're done here. They filed out of the conference room. In the hallway, Patricia turned to him, her expression complicated, relief mixed with worry, hope tangled with doubt. Don't mess this up, she said quietly. I won't. She studied his face for a moment. I believe you. I don't know why, but I do. She paused. Sophie's excited about visiting the cabin. Make sure it's ready for her. It is. I painted her room yellow, built her a desk. Something softened in Patricia's expression. Yellow's her favorite color. I know. They stood in awkward silence, two people who'd once loved each other, now connected only by the daughter they'd created and the wreckage of what they'd been. Thank you, Caleb said, for not fighting this harder, for letting me try. Don't thank me. Just be the father she needs. Patricia walked away, her attorney following. Caleb stood alone in the courthouse hallway, the magnitude of what had just happened settling over him. He'd won. Not everything, not full custody, not complete vindication, but enough. Enough to rebuild with Sophie. Enough to prove he was worth believing in. He drove back to the cabin in a daze, the Montana landscape blurring past. When he arrived, he sat in the truck for a long moment, staring at the structure that had saved him. The sagging porch he'd repaired, the windows he'd cleaned, the workshop where he'd remembered who he was. Inside, he found Howard's journal and turned to a random entry from 1995. Second chances don't announce themselves with trumpets. They arrive quietly, usually when you're not looking for them. Eleanor and I have had more second chances than we deserved, with each other, with our lives. with finding peace after so much loss. The trick is recognizing the chance when it comes and having the courage to take it, to build on it, to honor it with better choices than the ones that came before. Caleb closed the journal, his decision made. He pulled out the letter to Julie, read it one more time, then addressed an envelope. He packaged the rocking chair carefully in blankets and bubble wrap, securing it in a wooden crate he'd built specifically for shipping. At the post office in town, he sent both, the letter and the chair. The postage cost nearly everything he had left, but it didn't matter. Some debts transcended money. That's going all the way to Seattle, the clerk said, hefting the crate. What's in it? A promise kept, Caleb said. About 40 years late, but kept nonetheless. Back at the cabin, he prepared Sophie's room. Fresh sheets on the bed, the desk positioned by the window, her jewelry box placed prominently on the dresser. Everything ready for her arrival in 3 days. That evening, he sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. The golden light from the cellar window cast its glow across the living room floor, Howard's symbol of new beginnings, still shining after all these years. His phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Caleb Harper? A woman's voice, tentative. Yes, my name is Julie Brennan. I just received your letter. Caleb's breath caught. That was fast. I just mailed it this morning, not the one you mailed today. A different one? From yesterday. Did you send 2? He hadn't sent 2 letters. I only sent one today, with a rocking chair. The postal service called me. Said there's a large package requiring signature, arriving in 5 days. But the letter arrived today. The one asking if I wanted to know about my parents. Caleb's mind raced. He'd only sent 1 letter only today. Wait, Julie said. This letter isn't from you. It's old. Postmarked 2003, from someone named Howard Brennan. Her voice broke. From my father. The world tilted. That's impossible. Howard returned all your letters. He never responded. This one was never returned. It was lost in the mail for 22 years. Julie's voice was thick with tears. He wrote it 3 days before he died. The Postal Service just found it in some sorting facility renovation. They delivered it today. Caleb sat heavily in the rocking chair Howard had built, the chair he'd sat in countless times. What does it say? Julie was quiet for a moment, gathering herself. Everything I needed to hear. 3 months later, Sophie stood in the workshop, carefully sanding a small wooden box under Caleb's guidance. Summer sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles that floated like tiny stars. Feel the grain, Caleb said, his hand over hers, guiding the sandpaper. Work with it, not against it. The wood will tell you what it wants to be, his father's words. Howard's philosophy. Now Sophie's lesson. She concentrated, her tongue caught between her teeth the way she did when focusing hard. Like this? Perfect. You're a natural, Sophie beamed. She'd been visiting every other weekend since the hearing, and each visit she spent hours in the workshop, learning the craft that had saved her father. She had his hands, steady, patient, capable of creating beauty. The cabin had changed in 3 months. The repairs were complete now. New roof, reinforced porch, windows that actually closed properly. Caleb's furniture business had grown steadily. Word spread about the quality of his work, and customers came from as far as Missoula for custom pieces. He'd finished 6 more commissions since Bernard's table, each one better than the last. Each one proof that he could build something lasting. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a framed photograph. Howard and Eleanor, young and hopeful, standing in front of the half-built cabin. Beside it, a newer photo. Caleb and Sophie standing in the same spot, arms around each other, both smiling. The doorbell chimed. A recent addition. Caleb wiped sawdust from his hands and went to answer it. A woman stood on the porch. Late 40s, kind eyes. Howard's chin and Eleanor's smile. Beside her, a teenage girl with dark hair and an architectural sketchbook under her arm. Julie, Caleb said. Caleb. She smiled, tears already forming. Thank you for finishing what they started. They'd talked several times over the phone since that first call. Julie had read Howard's lost letter, the one where he'd apologized, explained, begged forgiveness. the one that had taken 22 years to find its way home. She told Caleb what it said, that Howard and Eleanor had loved her every day, that they'd thought staying away was protection, but died knowing it was cowardice. That if Julie ever found the cabin, she'd find the truth they'd been too afraid to speak while alive. The Postal Service couldn't explain how the letter had been lost for so long. Some sorting error, some mishap in the system. But Julie called it a miracle, arriving exactly when she needed it, exactly when someone had finally decided to tell her parents' full story. "This is Charlotte," Julie said, gesturing to her daughter. She wanted to meet the man who finished her grandfather's rocking chair. Charlotte stepped forward, shy but curious. "Mom sits in it every night now. Says it's like being held by people she never got to meet." Caleb's throat tightened. "They would have loved you. Both of you." "I know," Julie said simply. "I read their journals, the ones you sent. I know now." Sophie appeared in the doorway, curious about their visitors. Caleb made introductions, watching as the two girls, 1 9, 1 16, sized each other up with the cautious interest of strangers who might become friends. "Want to see the workshop?" Sophie asked Charlotte. "Dad's teaching me to build things." "Sure," Charlotte said, and they disappeared together, leaving the adults on the porch. Julie looked out over the meadow, the same view Eleanor had loved. "They built something beautiful here. They built something true," Caleb corrected. "Not perfect, but honest. They made mistakes, but they loved deeply. Sometimes that's all we can do." "The rocking chair arrived last week," Julie said. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever owned. Not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. A grandfather I never knew, loving a granddaughter he'd never meet. Across impossible distance." They sat on the porch steps, watching the afternoon light paint the mountains gold. "Howard's letter said he left the cabin and everything in it as a message," Julie said. "That whoever found it might learn from their story, might choose differently." "I did learn," Caleb said. "Learned that running from failure doesn't work. That building something real takes time and patience. That second chances have to be earned and honored, and you honored theirs. Completed what they couldn't, told me what they were too afraid to say." Julie wiped her eyes. "You gave me my parents back. Not the way I imagined when I first tried to find them, but the way they actually were, flawed, afraid, loving from a distance they thought was necessary." Inside the workshop, the girls' laughter rang out. Sophie showing Charlotte how to use a plane, both of them working together on some project. "She's good with wood," Julie observed.
"Like her father."
"Like her great-grandfather, like all of us," Caleb said. "We're all building something. Trying to create things that matter, that last, that carry meaning forward." The sun began to set, casting golden light through the cabin's windows. The same light that had drawn Caleb here 6 months ago, the same light Howard had installed as a symbol of hope and new beginnings. Julie stood, preparing to leave. "We're staying in town tonight. Can we come back tomorrow? Charlotte wants to explore the cellar, see where everything was kept." "Of course. Stay as long as you want. This cabin has your parents' story in every board and beam. You should know it." After they left, Caleb and Sophie made dinner together, one of Eleanor's recipes from the box in the kitchen. Chicken soup made with love, nourishing body and soul. They ate by lamplight, talking about the day, about Charlotte and Julie, about the ways families sometimes break and sometimes heal. Later, after Sophie was asleep in her yellow room, Caleb sat on the porch with Howard's journal. He'd read it cover to cover multiple times, but tonight he opened to the final page and added his own entry. "Howard and Eleanor, wherever you are, your daughter knows the truth now. She understands. She forgives. Your story didn't end the way you planned, but it ended with love recognized and honored. You taught me that starting over isn't about erasing the past. It's about building something new on top of it. Something stronger because of what came before, not despite it. Thank you for this cabin. Thank you for your story. Thank you for showing me how to be a father worth believing in. Your legacy continues." In Sophie's hands, learning to shape wood. In Julie's heart, finally understanding. In this cabin, still standing strong, still glowing with golden light, still promising new beginnings to whoever needs them. Rest easy. Your work is complete. He closed the journal, setting it back on the shelf where future visitors might find it. Let the story continue. Let it teach whoever came next. Whoever needed to hear that failure isn't final, that second chances exist, that love can find its way home, even through impossible distance and terrible mistakes. The Montana night settled around the cabin, vast and peaceful. Inside, golden light seeped through floorboards, and a man who'd remembered how to build sat quietly, grateful for strangers who'd become guides, for a daughter who'd given him another chance, for a life reconstructed one piece at a time. Outside, stars emerged in the darkening sky. Inside, everything was finally truly home.